Hi, welcome back to God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee, where we dive into the mysteries of existence, consciousness, and the unexplained. I'm your host, Lori Rehfeldt, with Donna Schreiber and with Candice Sanderson. And today we are in for an extraordinary conversation. My guest is Dr. Eben Alexander, a renowned neurosurgeon whose own near-death experience shattered his scientific skepticism and opened his mind to the profound reality of consciousness beyond the brain. His best-selling book, Proof of Heaven, has challenged the materialist view of reality and given countless people hope that life and awareness continues beyond this physical existence. As many of you know, my own experience as a military veteran stationed at RAF Bentwaters led me to question the nature of reality, perception, and high intelligences. Dr. Alexander's journey intersects with these questions in a very profound way. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? And what does it mean for us as individuals and as a species? So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's explore the depths of consciousness, the nature of the soul, and the mysteries of existence with Dr. Eben Alexander. Thank you so much for being here. It's just, like I said, it's just a privilege and honor to have you, and
Well, Lori,
love your
thank you very
book.
much. It's a real honor and privilege for me to be here. So thanks for having me on, and I appreciate what you do getting this out there.
Well, yeah, it's just been a wonderful opportunity. Usually I I like to start it with you going ahead and sharing your story, where it began. I mean,
Okay, I think what I can do is kind of give some main points, and then maybe we can interchange a little bit about where you guys want to focus, because there's a lot to the overall story. Um, but I think the important things to point out is that I'd spent the first 54 years of my life up until 2008 as an academic neurosurgeon. Thought I understood brain, mind, and consciousness. I had spent 15 years plus teaching neurosurgery as an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. And that's why what happened to me in November 2008 was so shocking, because it was a complete violation and overturning of everything that I'd come to believe about the brain creating consciousness and the relationship of our brain and body to conscious experience and to the reality of this surrounding physical world. Um, and I knew that nobody had an answer as to, how the brain made consciousness, but I figured in what John C. Eccles used to call promissory materialism, that if we just kept studying the brain and the body and the physical world enough, we discover how consciousness evolves. And what I've discovered since then, especially because of my journey, is that we had it all backwards, and consciousness is primary in the universe. And in fact, we're using kind of a connected consciousness. So it's really an extraordinary kind of 180-degree shift in my thinking. And all that is fueled because of the nature of my illness. And it's important for anyone to get. People often ask me, what do your skeptical scientific colleagues make of all this? And they don't realize that some of my greatest support over the last 16 years since my near-death experience has been from the scientific community. And it's really because of the extreme details of my case. And there's medical case report that was made on my medical records, came out September 2018 in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases. That case report was written by three doctors not involved in my care, but fascinated by my recovery, which really defies medical explanation in every way. And that was, to me, kind of the starting point of this incredible mystery I had to unravel about how I could have such a profound spiritual experience when my brain was very documented to be offline. None of the neocortex was still working. The neocortex is the calculator that's essential for any kind of perception we have, anything we see, hear, smell, feel, our uh, uh, assimilation of memories and projection of future events. Every bit of that depends on the neocortex. And yet mine was offline in the first hours of my coma. And it was a 7-day coma. It was a very long time to be deep from bacterial meningoencephalitis. And that's really where the gift of it arises. is in the incredible experience I had in a setting which would not have allowed for any kind of dream or hallucination. And in fact, when the peer review editors of the scientific journal challenged the physicians who wrote the case report and said, well, how do you explain this? It's unprecedented in the medical literature to be this ill from this kind of bacterial meningitis and then end up with a full recovery. How does that happen? And they said it's because he had a near-death experience. And that was good enough for the peer review editors and said, okay, we've got an explanation. They and the authors knew of other cases of extreme illness with recovery that violated all of our medical expectations, like Anita Morjani and her lymphoma that disappeared after her NDE, or Dr. Mary C. Neal, who had an over 30-minute warm water drowning while kayaking in Chile, broken legs and everything under a waterfall, and was brought to the surface dead. But she had a profound near-death experience and basically had a full recovery. So these things are associated with incredible healing. And the big message there is that all of us in the scientific world are starting to take seriously this notion that we're spiritual beings in a spiritual universe. And you might think spirituality is not much of a scientific topic, but when all the scientific evidence leads you to a notion of a primacy of consciousness and a connectedness of consciousness and a binding force of love that is so obvious in near-death experiences and is right at the core of the reality we live in, you have to start kind of upshifting your point of view. And that's what I've been able to do. And luckily, it's with the help of many other scientists around the world, because I'm in a group that communicate by email. And this group is doing tremendous work and has been for the last 6 decades in terms of promoting this notion of the primacy of consciousness. And it's a revolution that began with, the advent of quantum physics. There are many reasons why that's related that I can go into, but also non-local consciousness, telepathy, remote viewing, all these things point to a mind that's much grander than just something created by this 3.5-pound gelatinous mass sitting inside of our skulls. So there's much more to consciousness to be explained. And that is where I think my own experience proved as such a powerful catalyst. I'll briefly describe some of the elements of that experience, and then we can dive in with any specific questions you have. Important to point out that one of the most unusual features of my near-death experience, and in fact, I've never heard it of this degree in any other NDE, was amnesia, that I had no memory of Eben Alexander's life. In this whole 7-day coma, I was completely unaware of Earth, humanity, this universe. It was an empty slate. My language was all gone. I really was starting over at square one. And I think that was very important to get some of the deepest lessons, because if I'd had a more standard NDE, and certainly one that would have involved a life review, for example, involving my adoptive father. He had passed over 4 years before my life. He was an academic neurosurgeon, very important to me in my life. He was very spiritual, and I wanted to be that way. He took me to Methodist church every Sunday of my life growing up. And for him, he'd been a combat surgeon in the Pacific Theater during the Second World War, spent more than 2 years overseas, New Guinea, Philippines, and finally up into Japan. And I still have at my bedside the little pocket Bible that he had. It was Psalms and New Testament. And I find great comfort in that. And I think that's what got him through World War II relatively unscathed. He came back and headed up a neurosurgical training program, was a very loving soul. And he always used prayer in his work with patients. And he thought that prayer was very effective. He fully knew the reality of a loving personal God. That just was his knowing, in spite of his also knowing about physics, cosmology, neuroscience, every bit of that. But he was also very religious, not like many who grew up in the 60s and 70s. I always knew that science was the pathway to truth, but also like many, I made the mistake of thinking that Newtonian deterministic science that we studied so hard was the pathway to truth. And yet the reality is quantum physics is right at the core of a much deeper, more profound reality that points to the primacy of consciousness. And that's what I was about to discover in my journey. So again, briefly, in the state of amnesia, I entered what I call the earthworm eye view, a very primitive course on responsive realm, very murky. I didn't remember anything else. So to me, I just accepted it. This is the way things are. I didn't have any trouble with it, even though it sounds foreboding to people when I describe that Earth were my view. The good news is it didn't last forever. I was rescued by a slowly spinning white light that came packaged with a perfect musical melody, and that led up like a portal, like a wormhole up into this brilliant ultra real gateway valley. And that's where our word descriptions just fall apart. You know, I can try and describe it, but words really pale. And part of the problem is that realm is in an eternal realm. That's why when people describe life reviews, your life flashing before your eyes, if you study these cases by the hundreds, you find they are extraordinary, this kind of a life review thing. To me, it's right at the center of my questioning of the nature of reality and consciousness and time flow and all that, viewed from a purely materialist perspective. I think that we don't have a broad enough vision from these material bodies. Now, the thing is, though, exploring consciousness, meditation, centering prayer, near-death experiences, shared death, which are just like near death but happen in perfectly healthy people. All these are examples of kind of an elevated form of consciousness that shows us more directly the true kind of power that our consciousness has and this universe has. So that these life reviews of, you know, birth, death, everything in between, and plus past lives and even potentials of future lives, all this can be seen in this life review setting. So it's a realm where you're completely outside of Earth time. That makes everything much harder to explain to people back here, but much easier to see when you're there. So, in other words, witnessing all of that, your life starts to make much more sense. The hardships and challenges you face, you start to realize where they had contributed to your growth and understanding. So, this kind of trans-temporal view, or deep time, or meta time, the many different names that we can give to it, is very difficult to describe to people back here in the earthly realm. But anyway, in the Gateway Valley, to me, absolutely beautiful, a world of ideals. Um, I remember I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing above this beautiful meadow, this valley, and then out at the edges, this forest, these sparkling waterfalls into crystal blue pools. There were thousands of beings dancing in the meadow down below me. And how I labeled all that in weeks later, when I was coming back to this world and trying to write it all down to record it, I said they were souls between lives. And I could recognize all the joy and merriment, festivities, incredible, being fueled by up above these angelic choirs that were emanating chants, anthems, hymns that would just thunder through my awareness. I remember children playing, dogs jumping, you know, this incredible festivity and mirth, just incredible happiness. I mean, what you might expect from, you know, a spiritual world where the binding force of love is so obvious and so active. And the best part about it was I wasn't alone. I had already said I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing, millions of other butterflies looping and spiraling in vast formations. And beside me on this butterfly wing was a beautiful young woman, sparkling blue eyes, high cheekbones, high forehead, broad smile. She looked at me with a look of pure love. And I think her message to me, which I found so comforting in the moment, was the main message I was to bring back to this world. And when I wrote it all down as words weeks later, I translated that message that had been delivered to me in a pure conceptual, emotional, telepathic, emotional flow. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You are richly cared for. And in that setting, and when I reported that in Proof of Heaven, I also said, and you can do no wrong. And I wish I'd explained that much better in the book, because some people misinterpret that. They think, oh, so we can do anything we want. Well, no. In that realm of pure love and the binding force of love, it becomes crystal clear that our pathway as souls is to treat ourselves and others with kindness, love, compassion, mercy, acceptance when necessary, forgiveness, and of course, never forget gratitude. And these very deep and profound lessons were obvious when I was in that realm. And so you can do no wrong simply means we learn through these life reviews to treat others as we would like to be treated. In fact, if you go through large series of life reviews in the near-death literature, like Bruce Grayson's report on almost 700 life reviews in the fall of 2021, you'll find that 3/4 of people reporting these experiences say that it's from the perspective of everyone involved. So in other words, you don't just go in and feel what your life was like dealing with other people. What you feel is what your thoughts and actions did to the people around you. So if you hand out a lot of love and benevolence, great. That's what's reflected to you in the life review. If you hand out a lot of pain and suffering to others, selfish and greedy, that's what's reflected back to you in the life review. And it's very uncomfortable to be on the receiving end of that. And that's why I think we gently have this nudging force that's been active for ages to bring us more towards this oneness, this notion of love and compassion, because the life review is very much like the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated, written into the very fabric of the universe. Getting back to my journey, just to kind of complete it so we can then get into questions and all of that, is that what next happened, first of all, I recognized this soft summer breeze that blew through. That was my awareness of that divine God force. And that was shocking what reality that brought to me. And with that, those angelic choirs up above that were generating all this incredible mirth and festivity, they became yet another sound portal. And I remember seeing all of four-dimensional space-time collapsing down. All of this spiritual realm with metatime or deep time is a much richer kind of temporal observation from kind of the viewpoint of the eternal. All of that collapsing down until I was in what I call the core. And I was witnessing all that I had witnessed collapsing down as this complex oversphere that was there for teaching. And in the core realm, the core was completely beyond any kind of earthly sense of reality and spatialization, et cetera. I mean, this core realm, all of eternity was there as one small element of it. And yet there was this ocean of love. That's the best way to put it. This incredible sense of oneness with the divine, and this feeling that my very conscious awareness was ultimately sourced in the God force at the core of the universe. So that in essence, I came to see each and every one of us as sentient beings that cooperate with that God force of love to bring the manifestations into this world that our higher soul came here to bring. And that's what I was witnessing in the core realm. I was also told on entering the core, that we'll teach you many things. You'll be going back. You're not here to stay. And so anyway, there were many lessons. I can talk about all that in more detail. That's been the subject of thousands of podcasts and interviews and conferences, et cetera. But the essence of it is it really points to the oneness of consciousness and how we're all in this together. And to hurt another is to hurt yourself. Now, it turns out that I would tumble back down to that earth for my view spontaneously. I didn't understand it, but by remembering the musical notes of the melody that first was associated with that light portal that took me up into the Gateway Valley, just by remembering that in my mind, that musical cadence, that's what would conjure up that light portal, and I could go back in again. So I went through several times, found music, vibration, frequency to be an incredible kind of source of engineering to allow us to traverse spiritual levels, always welcomed by that beautiful, lovely guardian angel on the butterfly wing. And then off to the core realm for more. There were several lessons there. One in particular I want to point out, I call it the Indra's net vision. And it was this incredible vision in the core realm that happened after several passages there, not the first time through, where I saw all these threads, and these interwoven threads were the threads of our lives as souls. But this is where I'm pointing out that it's not like in kind of Buddhist interpretations of reincarnation, where you're trying to get off the wheel of suffering. In this vision, the Indra's net vision, I saw all of these threads leading toward this beautiful golden center. So in many ways, I saw that as kind of this Christ consciousness, a pure knowing and oneness with the divine that was the result of all of these sentient beings going up through multiple lifetimes, but all in this direction towards learning more about their relationship with the universe at large and with this God force connecting us with pure love at the core of the universe. And that Indra's net vision was very powerful because it affirmed to me the reality of life reviews and of reincarnation, even in a setting where I was amnesic for the life of Eben Alexander and thus could not have an Eben Alexander life review. But all that was for a much deeper purpose, to show me the reality of the journey, which I discovered in following years through meditation and things like that. So anyway, I would go through these multiple levels of this journey, And then finally, just as I've been told in the Corps the first time I entered there, you're not here to stay. There came a point where when I tried to conjure up the musical notes of the melody, it no longer worked to take me up out of the earthworm's eye view. To say I was sad at that point would be an understatement, but I also knew I could trust that I would be taken care of. And that's when I recognized thousands of beings surrounding me, going off into the misty distance here in the earthworm eye view. And their heads were down like that, many holding candles. And there was this murmuring energy coming from them that was surprising to me because it brought the very same sense of love and connection that I'd already received in the higher spiritual levels of the Gateway Valley and the core. But now I was feeling it down in this lowest dark level. And that was extremely reassuring. And I sensed it was leading me back somewhere, but I didn't know where that was. And it was then that I saw 6 faces that would bubble up out of the muck, say a few words, and disappear. I remember those faces as vividly today as if the whole thing happened this morning. That's how vivid the memories are from so much of this. And yet, I also knew I didn't recognize them. These were loved ones who were at the bedside the last 24 to 48 hours of coma, except for one. There was Susan Wrenches. She was a family friend from way back. I had known her in 1972 in freshman English at UNC Chapel Hill. And then we lost touch with each other. Then she was reacquainted with me through my former spouse. They taught together at Ravenscroft School in Raleigh. Then we lost touch again. But my family knew that she had done work with coma patients and other very ill patients using channeling to get to them from a mental state to heal them. And she wrote a book called Third Eye Open. This is Susan Wrenches, the family friend. Well, that my family had actually called Susan early in the week and told her about my predicament and asked her to intervene. And on nights 4 and 5 of my coma, she had channeled to me from 120 miles away in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Now, I was totally aware of her presence, just as I was of the other people who were present that last vision. Um, so when I was waking up in the first days of waking up, and I said, "But where is Susan? She was here too." They said, "Oh, well, she was never physically here, but she channeled to you." And I went, "Oh, okay, of course." I knew, of course, by that point that realm was completely non-spatially limited as our material realm. But anyway, kind of getting back to it all, it was the last face I saw that was the most important. That was the face that brought me back to this world. Because of my amnesia throughout this entire journey, I had thought, well, this can continue, it can cease, doesn't matter. But now all of a sudden, everything did matter because in this final vision, I saw the face of a 10-year-old boy. Now, I didn't recognize him. And it turns out it was my 10-year-old son, Bond. That name is far more appropriate than I knew at the time. But anyway, Bond, came in the bedroom. There I was in agony lying on the bed on November 10th, 2008. And he started rubbing my temples. As soon as he did, I felt like he'd driven a white hot spike through my head and just horrific pain. And it was soon thereafter that I lapsed into coma. But they had protected Bond from the worst news during that week. And now all of a sudden, on Sunday morning, day 7 of coma, he overheard the doctor's conference where they said I'd gone from a 10% chance of survival down to 2% with no chance of recovery. And that's when Bond thought, this is much worse than I've been told. And so it was really his pleading with me, Daddy, you're going to be okay. Daddy, you're going to be okay. Even though I didn't understand the words and I didn't know who he was, but I sensed this incredible connection with him and a responsibility as a soul that I had to come back. And that was probably the most terrifying moment of the whole journey because until then, it didn't matter. Now it all mattered a lot. But that's what brought me back to this world. Even though when I woke up, on the ICU bed and was fighting the ventilator, and they finally pulled out the breathing tube. And I said, "Thank you." I still didn't recognize my mother, my sisters, my sons at the bedside because of my amnesia. Still very active because the meningitis was only now resolving because of my NDE. But anyway, it was from then on, coming back to this world, trying to make sense of it. The big mystery to me initially, I didn't have my neurosurgical knowledge. That took about 2 months to fully return. And so initially, when I tried to tell my doctors about my experience, they would pat me on the back and say, "Well, your brain was soaking in pus. In fact, we have no idea how you're coming back to us now, but you can forget about it because the dying brain plays all kinds of tricks." So I thought, okay, wow, what a hallucination that was. And I remember when my older son came home, he was studying neuroscience in college at the time. He came home 2 days after I got out of the hospital, gave me a big hug, told me later it was like this There was this light shining within me, and I was far more present than I'd ever been before. But I remember telling him at that time, I said, you know, it was way too real to be real, which should have been a red flag to me. But then the more I dove into my medical records, went back and talked to my doctors, looked at CT and MRI scans, all the neurologic exams, this case was not lining up. That brain was in no shape to be harboring any kind of dream or hallucination, much less the most profound, memorable, detailed, and transformational set of events of my whole life. And so that was a deep mystery to me. And those who've read the book Proof of Heaven will realize that I finally started to accept the overall reality of the experience about 4 months after my coma. I was deep into this back and forth wrestling with myself over how this could be and trying to frame it in a scientific way. And that's when I received a picture in the mail. And that picture had to do with my adoption history. And I won't go into much more detail now because I don't want to spoil it for people who want to read the book, but it's an incredible kind of finale that I came to 4 months after my coma when I finally discovered the identity of that beautiful guardian angel on the butterfly wing. And ever since then, I've been hard at work with scientists around the world to explain how all these things happen and reincarnation, these heavenly visions that people have, shared death experiences, in addition to near death, after death communications, past life memories in children, suggestion of reincarnation, of which there are more than 1,700 solved and proven cases at the University of Virginia. So, you know, it's an exciting time to be alive. I'm glad that my own personal journey has helped me get on board with kind of the richer aspects of our existence. But ultimately, it's a lesson this world needs to learn very much right now because of all the political polarization, the warfare, the danger of nuclear war. There are a tremendous number of reasons why this profound lesson from the science of near-death experiences and the science of consciousness inform us that we're truly all in this together, and that binding force of love is something that can heal us and bring us into wholeness, and this entire planet can come into healing when this kind of lesson is properly applied and distributed.
That is incredible. I mean, I think about, the wormhole, say that that you went through, the spiral, like a corkscrew, I'm guessing. Was it a fast trip, or was it something that you felt like you were on a roller coaster ride or something? And
Well, I would say that those portals between like the Earth from my view and the Gateway Valley, and then the portal, they were all associated with music. They all seem to have this beautiful kind of flowing, wavy nature that was very natural and organic. So it didn't feel at all overwhelming. In fact, going through those portals, it seemed like a familiar thing to be doing. And I think that's one thing I'd like to stress here. I mean, all the words I use may sound foreign to some people, and yet there were literally thousands of people who reached out to me after Proof of Heaven came out, some of my early talks, that
Mhm.
shared that that the book awakened in them similar memories in their own past of things that they weren't aware of before. But now this kind of telling of the story, this kind of wording and these descriptions awoke in them a memory of something very deep. And what that points out to me is, for example, if you talk to Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, they're the MDs at UVA who've headed up these investigations over 6 decades of children remembering past lives. They will tell you you have to harvest those memories before age 6 or 7, because after that, almost all of these children forget past lives and between lives. In other words, there's a process that I call programmed forgetting that has to do, I guess, with giving us at this stage of human development to have skin in the game for this incarnation to best get the lessons from it. I think that is what demands this kind of program forgetting, and that way these children who were so vividly involved in remembering these past life memories, they would have nightmares, phobias, behaviors. Some of them, in fact, a third of Ian Stevenson's original cases, the child had a birthmark that corresponded with the mortal wound of the previous lifetime. If you don't get the power of that, then whew. And the reality is that Stevenson was a careful investigator. This is not some charlatan out there doing poor work. If you read his work, and read that of other people like Emily Williams Kelly who have written about him, you will find a tremendous amount of kind of corroboration that this was very intelligently gathered. He's
Mm.
nobody's fool, very brilliant man, and he just pursued where most people hadn't, to see what's going on with these kids. And when he started finding out that the child described often lived nearby in another village or a community that was adjacent to this one, or the cultures seem to somewhat be preserved in these kind of reincarnation cases, not always. But anyway, to me, that was a fascinating kind of realization. And it's important to get that reincarnation is part of human existence. And you can say you don't believe in it and you don't remember it. But, well, that's like most of us, we don't remember it. But the reality is, when scientifically and rigorously studied, you find plenty of evidence that reincarnation is very real, that our souls seem to come back again and again. And it appears to be a process of refinement, of transformation and growth, and of evolution. And to me, that's what's so exciting about it. And the reason we should take all this very seriously is because it contributes to basically the improvement and betterment of humanity, of all of our culture and civilization over time.
You definitely echoing a lot of what, I grew up very intuitive, to the point that I kind of freaked out my sister and a few other people that, it's like, where do you get this from? And all I can think is it's a sensitivity. It's that I'm so really close to the the other world, whatever's on the other side of the, if it's a plasma, whatever's on the other side. And when I was working in insurance in Roanoke, and I would go to houses, and a lot of it was synchronicity too. It was, I'd say, I want to check on so and so. It's just out of the blue. I go over there, I find out that I was there for a different reason, and she was dying. In fact, she passed away 2 days later, and she was like really upset about leaving her husband. And all of a sudden, I knew something told me in my head, "You're here to tell her that love is seamless. Love is a continuum. It will never die. It will, it, and you'll see each other again." And I didn't even use words. I sat with her directly in front of her on a stool and reached out and held her hand. So this is somebody I
Mm.
really didn't know. I was pretty much a stranger, and the fact that they had invited me in the house, and um, it was just phenomenal. And then at that point, I realized that there were angels. There were one of these tall beings in the room who were there to escort her, to take her to the next realm. And and at that point, I realized, and this didn't happen just once. This happened like 4 or 5 times,
Mhm.
and it was interesting. So all of a sudden I'd look around the room, I'm like, I don't feel them. And then all of a sudden there they are, I
Mhm.
can feel them, I can see them through my mind's eye. And it was funny. And then you go outside and the cool air hits you in the face, and you're like, what was I just in, a vortex or something? It was just
Beautiful.
so, yeah.
Well,
So
Lori, thanks for sharing that. And I love your sense of, as you use the word synchronicity, and I think that's a beautiful way of putting it, that there are no accidents. And I've certainly come to realize that often those meaningful coincidences, or synchronicities, as Carl Jung called them, are very important to pay attention to, because they are kind of a nudge wink from the universe that we're actually here for a purpose, and it's a
yeah,
shared purpose, and
mm,
we're here to help each other, uh,
yeah. And
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 and that's
grow
and
at
that's
the end of the
yeah,
day.
and that was the other thing that I found. It was like I just wanted to really help people, and
Mhm.
the whole thing of seeing, if there's an enemy on the earth, if we want to say about this negative energy that is out there, that our weapon of choice is, and I don't mean to use it in a negative way, is kindness, is to
Right,
be
you're
kind,
absolutely right.
to be loving, and to you see somebody who's thirsty in the desert to go out there and make sure there's water out there so that they have it. Just these little actions to me have a profound result. I just hope when I get to the point of when I have my review that, because I was a naughty little kid sometimes, I would get an F on a test and I would forge my mother's name. And, so I'm sure I'm going to see that on my
It'll be there.
review. But,
Well,
it's, I just really truly hope that.
I think what you're saying reminds me that my wife, Karen Newell, often makes the point, why wait for a life review? Do a daily review or
Yeah,
weekly review. And she's the one who really taught me 10 years ago to really focus on how I treat people. And this includes how we treat ourselves. In fact, one of my lessons from my journey was that we don't even love ourselves enough. And that as the truly sacred and divine beings with the power we have to bring love to this world, that's to be embraced. But as you say, bringing love into the world, kindness, compassion, mercy, these are the keys. And I know in the current kind of politically polarized world we live in, sadly, there's a lot of sentiment against refugees. And I feel like so many of these refugees from war-torn areas and impoverished areas, crime-ridden areas, et cetera, we need to do more to help people.
yeah,
And there are a lot of people who need our help today. And to try and pretend that they're all, criminals and vagrants and all that is just completely wrong.
yeah,
Uh, there's something much richer going on here, an opportunity for growth. And to simply refuse people who need help, to refuse them, is taking steps backwards in our soul journey, and certainly not something that we're going to be grateful for in our life review. That's why doing daily reviews and weekly reviews to realize the wrongness of that kind of maltreatment of others. If that's what it takes right now, let's do it. But we need to foster this deep lesson of near-death experiences that's universal. It goes back thousands of years. Many people have had NDEs. They might have formerly been atheist or agnostic, but more than 90% of near-death experiencers, no matter what their prior belief system, come back not just believing, but knowing that there is a
yes,
infinitely powerful God force at the core of the universe. And again, this is not whether you want to call this some Christian God or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, all the names we try and label it with as if we have such power. No, it is very universally a force of love and compassion, oneness, and kindness, and that's it. And the more we focus on that and get away, I mean, to me, it's tragic that occasionally religious ideologies have been used to push conflict and war. Nothing could be further from the actual teaching of the prophets, and it's all about love and kindness, compassion. We need to return to that. And certainly when I see some forms of Christianity in the modern world, working against people who need help, like refugees, I go, what has happened to our religious systems that they've fallen so far from, the ideal of where they should be? And, religious systems have had 5,000 years or so to teach us the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. And luckily, the current revolution in consciousness is using science to take us in the same direction. And this is rigorous scientific investigation of these kinds of cases and deep exploration of the nature of the brain mind connection. All of it is leading us towards a notion of this oneness of mind, this oneness of consciousness. And that one mind is one we all share. And people who need more information on that, I would say that the book that Karen and I wrote, Living in a Mindful Universe, is the true proof of heaven. It goes far beyond my original book, Proof of Heaven, to show the scientific and spiritual worlds are coming together in very powerful fashion to show us this underlying nature of reality that's based on love and kindness and togetherness. I think that is ultimately what is going to take this world to the next level. And given that,
and what else is interesting too is that with all these UAPs, UFOs, that kind of thing, I truly believe that it comes from that same place that God, it can it comes from the same place that they're not here to invade, They're
Right.
here to, we live on a gem. We live on a beautiful blue planet, and there's no planet out there like ours. And what we're doing to it, I think the powers in the heavens and whatnot want us to be stewards of our planet and take care of it and do what's right. And we're definitely, some of us are trying our best, but it's still, it's like people just think it'll go away. And but I truly believe that whatever's out there, that if people have a sighting or whatnot, that it's because they're worried about us. I mean, when I
Right.
had my UFO sighting, it wasn't that far from um I was in the Air Force, wasn't far from the we had a bomb dump that had nuclear bombs on it. So I
Mhm.
I get it, I'm just like, yeah, it's because we're like children with matches, you know,
Right.
like.
I agree completely. And a lot of my thinking on those lines comes from some time I spent with Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut. I stayed with him in Florida several times about 10 years ago. And discussions with him, it was clear he knew of similar kind of interventions by UAPs, orbs, what have you, interfering with military testing and especially nuclear weapons facilities. I agree. I think they're here to help us because it is a position of complete insanity that we even have these thousands and thousands of nuclear warheads on this planet. Uh, and I believe it is time to denuclearize. And in fact, we got rid of a lot of nuclear weapons in the past, like in the Obama administration, a lot of nuclear weapons were discarded. And I think it's possible to move forward on the same kind of front today and work with the Chinese and the Russians, work with others too. But China, Russia, and the U.S. has the majority of these weapons, and that's what will end all life on this planet is a nuclear war. It won't be survivable. I don't want people to be believing, oh, we'll have a limited nuclear war and whatever. No, we don't want a nuclear war. We need to get rid of these things. And I believe that a proper uh, kind of spiritual environment that we're rapidly getting to in the kind of scientific front might help the politicians to gain the spine and the courage they need to start getting rid of nuclear weapons. But we are in a horrible place when any of the current world leaders could push a button and all life on this planet will come to an end. There are way too many of them out there, and I think there are practical ways forward to get rid of them. That and battling our addiction to carbon-based fuels, I think will get rid of the two main threats to human existence, and so we need to pay attention to both of them. But that also,
And factory farming, the way we treat animals, I think that's
absolutely,
a big problem.
yeah,
So.
because animals are part of the spiritual awakening. You cannot, it was Rene Descartes who got the scientific world in trouble decades or centuries ago when he said that animals were just machines, only humans were conscious. And unfortunately, that complete nonsense, he probably didn't, obviously didn't have a dog or a cat, but that kind of insanity was active through most of the 20th century. And
Mhm.
finally, scientists, there have been some memoranda and manifestos put out in the last decade professing that animals are conscious too, and they're part of the spiritual world that we're talking about. And I agree with you. Our practices with animals for food, etc., it's just horrific, and we must kind of address that as spiritual beings. Now, I'm not saying that it's from my perspective, animals eating animals is part of the natural order. Uh, but the way we treat animals and the imprisonment for life and just caging and all of that is terrible and needs to be stopped. And we need to have a much more focused and mindful attention to how we treat animals at large.
Because again, it comes down to that kindness and love that you're talking about, and that is coming from heaven or coming from the realm that you experience. I often wonder if you were sent to another dimension or sent to a like another constellation or whatnot. It's just you
Well,
know.
there's
Fascinating.
certainly, I would say in discussions of NDEs and UAPs and all of that, the role of higher dimensional spaces is very important. And that includes higher temporal dimensions too. A colleague of ours, Bernard Carr, a well-known physicist in the UK, he did his postdoctoral work under Stephen Hawking. And Bernard Carr is a brilliant physicist, and he's recently done some landmark work on higher dimensional explanations for all these phenomena. And I think, to me, especially with my work with meditation, I use a form of binaural beat brainwave entrainment. And people who want to kind of follow and learn more about that should just go to sacredacoustics.com to learn more. But the reality is that all of this work with meditation and exploring consciousness is kind of exploring higher dimensional spaces. That's what best explains it.
Mhm.
That we have different dimensional access to these things, and that includes, as I said, very importantly, um, higher temporal dimensions too. And that's what enables us to have this kind of meta awareness of our lives and of our existence as souls. Can see it in that kind of bigger picture using these higher dimensional models. And Bernard Carr has been exemplary as a scientist contributing to that line of research.
Wow. Hey, Don, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Eber that in 2016, my son had a brain injury. He was overdosed on heroin, and they said he was brain dead.
Oh.
But so, and I was a Catholic at the time, and I knew I needed prayer, but I went through this season because even though I was Catholic and I went to Catholic school and everything, I really was struggling reading the Word, the Bible. And so I went after every book about God I could find. And your book is one that I read, and it blessed me so much because the fact that you were like a skilled doctor in your own right, and this happened to you, and I talked to God a lot, and I said, you were like the perfect person to share this kind of story because you're scientifically inclined, is your nature, and you're sharing a supernatural event that God came in, and so it encouraged me so much because they were telling me, brain dead. My son was an organ donor. They wanted to donate his organs. So I had like 3 days to have this meeting. And I am a ferocious reader. So I read your entire book, I don't know, like in 2 days. But it encouraged me to know that, I felt like God was really speaking to me during the season. All right. And something you said about the having the interview of your life, when I was 6 years old, I was in the car with my dad and we had an accident, and I had this happen as a 6-year-old, and I'll never forget it because it was so vivid, it was so real, and it was like watching a movie. It was like watching on a big screen very close to me of all events, and I'm thinking, I'm 6 years old, how much did I have to really show? But it showed everything, and so I do believe, what you're saying. And also when you were talking about the music, when I had a God experience when they told me we're going to have a meeting to pull the plug. I got in my car and I said to God, I said, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And I felt like pray incessantly. And I'm like, I could do that. I can do that. And I'm driving a client to Manhattan. So I'm like, I can do that. And then God said, no, I want you to put it on Facebook. I want you to ask everyone that has a personal relationship with me to stand in the gap and pray for your son, because your son is fighting for his life. And I was like, oh, don't really want to do that. I said, it'll go viral. And it's like, who wants to put your kid's a heroin addict on Facebook? But I knew that this was God. And I made a decision and I said, you know what? I will obey. And the second I said, I will obey, it was like the heavens opened up like this, sideways, and this loud rushing wind came all over me from the top of my head, all down my shoulders. And I'm still driving. I got a client in the back, but I'm having this experience. So at the end of this, I dropped the client off and I'm turning around and I'm thinking to myself what I just experienced. And I said, wow, why does God want me to put this on Facebook? And I'm thinking, because bad news travels fast, it's going to go viral. And I get this epiphany, like, oh my God, I think God's going to heal him. And God wants an audience. If God wants an audience, he's definitely going to heal him, because why would he do this and have everybody watching and have it not work? So then I said, but wait a minute, how great is our God? If God is going to heal him, he'll also take the addiction off, So anyway, from that moment on, within, fast track the story, this happened on a Friday. That Monday, the pull the plug did not happen. He actually opened his eyes. And so they didn't pull the plug. Within 4 weeks, he got off life support and they transferred him to a nursing home to live his life a vegetable. They said he would never walk or talk. Brain dead is brain dead. Everything was gone. He was without oxygen 15 hours, right? So it was, they're telling me this, but I said, listen, I just know I'm listening to him, that God is telling me he's going to heal him. Within 4 months, my son walked out, walking, talking, whole. All right.
So
We had a
great.
new MRI and the MRI still said brain dead. They said, this is impossible. This can't be his, but that's
So
what
much
it
for the
was.
MRI. Well,
Yeah.
Donna, thank you for sharing that beautiful story.
Yeah.
But that's the point I was making earlier about the NDEs with miraculous healing. The scientists of the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases are wise enough to pay attention to these cases and say, okay, this is something, it shows us an incredible power of healing. We should pay attention if we like healing people.
Yeah.
And I love how you had to kind of wrestle with it a bit to take this directive from God, but you decided to do what you were instructed, and things ended up working out.
Yes.
And this is to me very important. And our lives, none of us is meant to live forever, but to live a long and happy and healthy life where we contribute to the well-being of others, I think is certainly an admirable and realistic goal for any of the people listening to this podcast. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And to me, it's become very clear that the universe basically reflects back on us what we put out. And so if we put out kindness and love and compassion and mercy, and we want healing for others, that's generally what the universe will reflect back to us. And
Yeah.
to me,
You
it's
know
been
what I
a very
also,
rewarding process.
yeah, what I also realized too is that was probably the worst moment in my life, the worst thing that could happen to a parent.
Mhm.
And yet God told me to put on Facebook to share it with the whole world. All right. And I learned something, because it was like, it was humbling for a moment. Didn't want to do it for a moment, like typical mom, don't want to, it's private, whatever. But once it was off, once it was out in the universe, so many people felt hope that God is real. And that was really what, and from that moment on, once I had like the Holy Spirit like amped in me, God never stopped talking. So like during this journey, when my son was in the nursing home, God would showed up in my car a lot, and he'd say, like at one point he said, Donna, Satan marked him. He wants to take him. And if he does not surrender his life to me, he said he will die and he will go to hell, because he's doing everything that Satan wants him to do. He's abusing his body, all of these things. So this 20-minute ride, he's like, you're gonna have to talk to him. You gotta do something. And I already tried to do an intervention, and my son came out of the coma. Interesting is that he was in the coma for, oh gosh, I guess a couple of days. And when he came out, I said, did you hear anything? What were you experiencing? And he said, Mom, I was in the ocean and I had a life preserver and I'm sitting in the middle of the ocean. And he said, these demons came over to him and they were trying to take him. They're going, you're going to hell and we're taking you. And he heard a voice from heaven saying, no, you can't touch him. You're in international waters. And his Like his future has not been determined yet. It's still under observation. So he was like in a waiting, it was like being in a holding pattern. Okay. And this is where I feel like, I did talk to my son, and my son, when he came out and he was talking, he talked about it like a month later, after the accident happened. And first thing I said to him, because they're telling me brain dead, I said, are you in pain? And he says, I feel like I got a pinched nerve in my neck. And I'm thinking, praise the God, because that's intelligence. There's intelligence there, Well, we just had him with a neurologist because we wanted to see where he's at now with a new MRI and blood work and like a whole intensive thing. And the MRI now says completely whole. His brain is normal. No, it's in the normal range,
Right.
So I mean, you got to give God all the glory. And
Right.
at one
Well,
point,
God
God
is-
even said to me, I was really praying for my son hard because the addiction's always been a struggle. And God said, he's going to go through it. That's not telling me like it's going to be rainbows and butterflies, And God showed me in life, we want just like a good, happy life that, pleasant, all good things. It doesn't go that way. Because like you said, we're here to learn something. So we each have something to learn, whether yours is patience or, mine is gratitude, whatever it is, there's lessons that each of us is kind of like we signed up to this, to come here. And when recently my son had a relapse, okay, and God told me a month prior, he said, Satan's coming for your family. And I was like, oh, okay, I got to amp up my praying. And somebody gave me a ticket to go to a brunch at a church. And somebody at the church was speaking, and they said the number one thing to fight the spiritual warfare is speaking in tongues. So I said, okay, I'm speaking in tongues. The next day, there's a giant falcon in front of my house for like 45 minutes, like guarding my house. And I was talking to somebody, and they said, the falcon stands for protection, and I felt like God was saying, Donna, you're going to go through this. You can't avoid whatever is coming down. None of us can avoid what God has planned, good, bad, or indifferent. There are lessons in it. And he says, you're going to go through it. He goes, but I just want you to know, I put that falcon there to know that you're not alone. And I'm in front of you. I'm in front of you. So you're going to walk through it, but I'm in front of you. And anyway, so the event, it did happen, the attack. And we're fine. Like, I know God is so real, and it's working out. God is working it out. Now, my son is getting help. He's going to go to a rehab. And
Right.
but I honestly, during this thing, I literally had like a bullseye on me. And it was like, God said, like in a way that the enemy had full on attacked me every way that you could as a parent. And but I noticed the difference is that I understand, so that like, say, if my son is coming at me verbally, I'm able to have grace and mercy because I understand. I already know it's not even him. He's being used as a pawn. The enemy's
Right.
trying to hurt me, not really because he cares about me, because he really wants to hurt God. So my reaction is no longer as it was in 2016. I wanted to, really have at it at my son. When now it's just love and compassion and mercy and grace.
Right.
That
Exactly. They're
is
very
just like,
powerful.
yeah.
It's
And
like
I felt like it was a test, because we all have trials and tests. And I feel like, and it's always like you said, it's frequency. I always pray every day for God to raise our frequency, not just for me, for all God's children, raise the frequency that they can hear you better. Because we all need to get to that source to have, that's how you have a blessed life. That's how you have happiness. It doesn't matter. It's not what's happening to your life. It's how you're responding. And the only way you can respond, if you're responding correctly with love, grace, peace, joy, and mercy, that's how, no matter what goes on, you're walking through life with a smile on your face. No matter what you're facing, you're like, praise God through the whole thing,
Well, absolutely. I think you make a lot of wonderful points, and certainly beliefs are crucial here. And if people believe none of this is possible, they're going to have a lot of trouble harvesting it in their lives. But for people who believe, that these miracles can happen, they start running into miracles all the time. As long as you're busy kind of serving as a conduit for that love
Mm.
of basically, I call it the love of the creator for the creation, but we're co-creating this universe with that God force, which is all about love. And the more we kind of acknowledge that and believe in the reality of it, the more it becomes our reality. And that's where, especially with things like healing for self and others, healing friends, other people that we pray for, etc., can be a very powerful ingredient because it shows the interconnection that we share through this kind of mental layer of the universe. But ultimately, the healing force of the binding force of love. That's what we're manifesting. And I think your stories about your son do a beautiful job of putting that right up front, in the
Yeah.
spotlight where it belongs, because it's a beautiful story of kind of soul journey and difficult situations that lead to a tremendous amount of soul growth. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Candice, is there anything you'd like to ask or share?
I have enjoyed every moment of this. What I'm hearing, and I'm nodding all the way through
Me too.
the interview, is the power of love, the power of compassion. Eben, it was your son whose love brought you back to the 3D. But when we make those transitions to that field of energy that's around us, hopefully it's not through a near death experience, but through meditation, through prayer, through something spontaneous that happens, but we step into a field of energy with higher vibrational frequencies. And Tesla was right. It's the secrets of the universe, energy, frequency, and vibration. But the more we stay in that field, the more it changes us. And each trip that we make there and we return, we're altered just a bit. But each trip, we start to realize the importance of love, of compassion, of smiling at that stranger.
Right.
When you have been on that other side, you taste unity and you know that you are part of this divine energy. And when you realize that and then you come back, this is how we can change the world. It's like
Right.
one smile at a time. Bring that energy back with you and let your light shine.
I agree. Beautiful. I'm glad you brought up Tesla. I'll pop out one quote from Tesla that I've always loved. He said, the first that when science begins to investigate non-physical phenomena, in the first decade, they will make more progress than all their previous history. So in other words, I think we're very close to that decade now because science is well onto this. There are many scientists around the world studying these phenomena of kind of primacy of consciousness. And I think that scientific adventure that Tesla was referring to is just about to begin. So it's wonderful talking with you all. And anyone who wants to reach out to me, they can do so through ebenalexander.com to learn more, sacredacoustics.com for the meditation, read Living in a Mindful Universe to see how science and spirituality are strengthening each other in the current era as we move into this whole new phase of humanity. So thank you. It's been a joy talking with all of you.
Oh, thank you too. And yeah, it's been a real gift having you here and listening to Donna and Candice. But your story is so phenomenal. Yes, you would just you were actually designed to go through that experience and be the voice of people who don't have your expertise, especially laying it out in such a logical, uh, you just can't, you didn't give any wiggle room for people to say, oh, well, if you just drink a cup of tea, it'll go away or whatever. You just you know, you laid out an argument like an attorney who, you know, was
Well,
gonna say, I'm gonna show you this.
the good news is, you know, to me, the real gift was when I shared my story publicly, thousands of people around the world shared their story back with me privately. And that has been a tremendous gift. And it showed me just how uh, common these experiences are. In fact, the second book, Map of Heaven, was all about the commonality of these experiences. I mean, we have neighbors who have had these experiences, very extraordinary, in a very conservative little neighborhood that we live in. So they're not hard to find. People are not necessarily willing to talk about them. So you have to ask questions. And I certainly encourage all doctors and nurses, if you have a patient who comes out of coma, ask them if anything happened. You know, if they have a near death kind of situation medically, ask them if they remember anything. And the more we start recovering and harvesting and asking about these memories and compiling them, the more we're going to build up a very realistic picture of the full extent of kind of human potential, which includes especially our vast spiritual kind of united potential.
I think I was one of those people that wrote you a letter.
Well, good.
I'm serious.
Well, a
So
lot of
so so
people
so
certainly
we
felt
were,
that
yeah, so
commonality.
yeah, so we were all a part of that vibrational force that went back to you in all
Yes. Well,
voices.
I mean, I'm grateful to all the many near-death experiencers and others, after-death communications, shared death experience, what have you, to all the people who share them. And when people reach out to me, I urge them, go public with this. The more we talk about this and share these stories, the better for all of us. So thanks for doing what you do, Lori, and getting this out to the world. And it's been a joy talking with you, Donna, and Candice, catching up with you again. So thank you all very much. And
Thank you so much too. And this is
I
God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. And thank you again. Bye-bye.